Welcome to the CPTM Smart Partners Hub. It is the beginning of October. In fact, it is 3rd of October today, and very happy that John Carter, CPTM companion and well-known private sector in our movement for so many years, is with us for a couple of weeks in London, Windsor. But today we updated each other about various things that took place in the inclusion initiative in particular, and on the way to AGM on 30th of October.
Yeah.
So welcome, John. And
thank you.
For those who
sorry I can't be here.
You can't be here, but you'll be here virtually.
Absolutely.
So, we'll talk about crypto. You'll be here virtually anyway.
Right.
Now, one of the reasons why it's important for you, on behalf of Hydraform and Robert Plattner and your colleague and so on, to another private sector, to remind us about the business-like perspective on the inclusive initiatives, is because we seem to be able, with the inclusion initiative networks, the CPTM, to be engaging new type of private sector who are preoccupied or engaged into cryptocurrency, blockchain, all these things that we put them under the umbrella of emerging digital landscape. And I was just mentioning to you that it was an outstanding intervention that one of the companies who were with the central bank governors in the last 2-3 years, Chainvine, made in relation to the hurricanes, disasters in Antigua and Barbuda and the others. And that even more so showed us that the new type of business is business in the digital landscape has something to offer beyond what people are associating digital landscape with, which is Silicon
theory.
Valley
or
theory or data science and so on. So it was a very, very interesting intervention, which I talked to you about it, and hopefully Oliver Oram, Chainvine, together with Antigua and Barbuda and a few others, will be following and will be supporting.
Well, hopefully they'll be feeding it back so that the people know what in fact happened. And as I understand it, during the hurricane, most communications were down. There were a lot of problems, and they were concerned about loss of information and loss of systems. And this digital landscape...
But potentially a kind of loss of national payment systems, potentially not just the IT infrastructure and the basic
actual operations.
Actual operations. And that is where we hope to kind of go a bit more in depth and to add to the emerging digital landscape as more specific application. But we are, as usually around September, October, we are also, as CPTM, kind of trying to share the various experiences of central banks, Bureau of Standards, and so on, with the communities that they are part of, more international, global communities. So, for instance, about a week ago, we came back from International Standards Organization, where a number of Bureau of Standards within the CPTM network, they happen to be, and they happen to get together, and the issue of emerging digital landscape within standards has been raised for the developing countries in a way that it was more informative and very, how could I say, very foresight-like, and this in a pragmatic way. I have not seen, John, and I haven't yet mentioned to you about it, I may tell you a bit more. I have not seen so much focus up to now on foresight in a pragmatic way than at the ISO meetings through the German Bureau of Standards, who got a foresight unit within the German, I forgot to tell you that, German Bureau of Standards. And the foresight is particularly focusing on this open data, open for change and so on.
And the pickup on processing, so that it's better managed.
Yes.
So that they can link more effectively.
So now, of course, they are doing that because within Germany, industry, as you know, excels.
Yeah.
And there is a whole strategy called Industry 4.0. That means kind of with very much embedded into data technologies and so on. But one would say that the Bureau of Standards, and this is what, as a private sector, if you could reflect just quickly, if the Bureau of Standards within Swaziland, Lesotho, I'm not saying South Africa, they're there too, but there is a tradition there, and there is quite a heavy industry for so many years. In Uganda, in Antigua, in Barbados, in Malaysia, the Bureau of Standards, they could probably act alongside central banks more as motivators, like attractors of modernization or stimulus to industry and to business.
Opening up opportunities where historically the people have been followers and now they can join. Not necessarily as leaders per se, but to join into a process.
Yes, to join
and become leaders in due course, but to join.
Accelerate the process.
Where currently they've been followers. They comply with a set of rules because they feel those rules are necessary or they're obliged to. But suddenly if you apply a set of rules that are more international, more acceptable, you can suddenly sell your product or be more acceptable in a number of places which you might otherwise not be allowed to join.
Yeah, and as you know, is probably they're about 3 years by now. The idea of leveraging the value of knowledge, technology, and data by central banks, by standards, and so on, is kind of well established. Not quite clear what that means.
And how they're going to manage it.
Because if you look at central banks, they have been kind of now quite explicitly, not just theoretically, kind of hit by the fact that they need to understand the process through which data could adapt the system of the bank. I was just sort of trying to include into the Commonwealth Ministers of Finance and Central Bank Governors CPTM brief, which needs to go tomorrow to Washington, or Commonwealth Secretariat to the Economic Division to make it available to the central banks. I was trying to include the latest from the IMF Managing Director, Christine Lagarde. Her speech at the Bank of England 2 days ago was entitled Central Banking and FinTech, Financial Technology, a Brave New World, ? But he does say that it is a great concern, the idea of how will FinTech change central banking over the next generation, and in particularly virtual currencies, new models for financial intermediation, and artificial intelligence. Now, all these things have been debated in the last 3 years by the core leading central bank governors, including in July. So, there is a question of private sector from this digital landscape, that they are specialized in blockchain, they are specialized in wallets, they are specialized in data mining, that they are specialized in identity or sovereignty identity. what type of private sector are those?
Yeah, that's going to be my
How
question.
do they, I mean, we were talking to the private sector, to themselves, to say how do they describe themselves? How do they relate to us?
And which parts of the private sector?
And we, how do they relate to the
Take
conventional
the banks.
private sector?
How do the banks fit? Where do the banks fit? What's
Yeah.
the relationship
Yeah.
going forward? I mean, you know
And
what
there
the
was a
stuff...
question, just and then I'll
No.
leave it to you. There was a question about should there be partnerships with this type of new private sector? Or do you call them private sector? How do you call them? Digital industry, so to speak. Some are startups, but not everybody is a startup. There are big ones.
Well, take, as you say, startups on the
So,
one side,
private
established
sector
on the other side.
discount. Yes.
Intermediaries, intermediates. Who are they? I don't know, to be honest, where all of these are, who they are. But it's quite clear if you're changing the basic rules, and the basic rules relate to the currencies, the fiat currencies, the hard currencies, and suddenly you've got the cryptocurrencies, and then you've got all the balance of payments, you've got all the issues of nations. Who's going to be doing what, and who decides where the boundaries are? Mm-hmm. Now, you were talking earlier about standards, you were talking earlier about financial inclusion. To a large degree, historically, I think, the boundaries have been reasonably well known and probably quite well directed, well, perhaps not directed, but certainly managed. Some less responsibly than others, but suddenly you are changing the basics. Who is the authority? Who manages? Who directs? I see China suspended the Bitcoin the other day because it sort of got away from everybody. Bitcoin is one of many, and it's probably one of the starters, and very quickly there'll be many others. You can't produce one maverick and not have a lot of other mavericks coming. So this is a confusing time for us, me in the business sector, an old hat business. And what about the new people? A lot of people have got a lot of ideas, but which is the forum in which you discuss it?
Yes,
which
yes,
is the
yes.
forum
What
in
are
which
the
you are
types of
able
forum that are useful?
to discuss without feeling completely lost, and where people are actually going to try and help?
Yes,
I have a feeling that despite a lot of comments about CPTM and where does it go, actually we represent through the dialogue system a unique position
absolutely.
that we need to better utilize and bring in the changing systems and structures and standards and the currencies and the cryptos to debate and discuss so that we perhaps better understand it. Because one thing is clear, the new is always new and wonderful, but it's not always necessarily the final answer. It's going to be changing. And I was talking earlier about the when cell phones first came to the bush in Malawi, everybody switched to cell phones because the landlines were a disaster. But within a very short period, we realized that the landlines were still relevant, but they needed conversion. They needed an adjustment. So the same must apply to current financial systems, standards and relationships, and how they relate to what's changing at the moment, and who is in a position to debate it objectively. Some, yes, not all. And maybe we can help.
If, as a private sector, you were to say, well, why am I bombarded with so much preoccupation by CPTM about central banks, statistics, standards, digital landscape? Because one would say, well, shouldn't I look into environment where I make some money for this or that? Should I look in agriculture? Shouldn't I look into, So...
Well, I think the answer is we should be looking at all of those. It's very hard to look at everything at once.
Of course. But so there is this interconnection that is very much driven today by data.
Yeah.
And because of that, you can look not at once, but you can connect one to another. And
Yeah, I think the biggest mover at the moment is the flood of data that's coming through the door. And it's the question of seeing what is there,
Single
trying
pattern,
to understand
single pattern.
how you
See a
can
pattern.
pick up patterns, and what you can do to not be overwhelmed, because we're overwhelmed with paper, with documents, with this, that, and the other, and to try to understand what are the influences that are coming through that you have to adapt for and change towards, partly to make a living, but largely to be able to survive and understand what's happening, because the changes are coming dramatically
You have to
fast.
understand what is happening.
And I was just talking a little earlier, and as I said to you, I was trying to get my mind around this big data, and my one daughter turned to me and she said, Facebook. Facebook. There's your biggest one at the moment, or one of the biggest ones. And, so it's very important, because you're picking up the trends of what is actually happening and what people are thinking.
That's it.
Whether the one relates to the other or influences the other, which is the relevant factor, and what are the facts behind it and underneath it, not the frivolous.
But John, one of the main things that in the last 3 years you hear around these applications related to data is that you can develop an understanding about the data, but is a business model that associated with that application emerges, which is different from before, and people can't quite put their fingers on it. You call it business model, but it's business model in the sense of governance and different way of looking at, how you manage assets. Do you need assets? You don't. It's a completely different perspective of a business model, which is in the business of making an income from data.
Something, yeah.
Yes.
But are you not concentrating, partly because you've got the converted working with us, statistics, banking, finance, national, the important items are the money and where it's going, and who's managing it to best advantage, and so that it's not being stolen and plundered wholesale as it is in some places. So that's very critical. But as you said earlier, there's the environment, there's the food, there's the climate, there's the issue of what happens next. Just a quick diversion here. 2 weeks ago I was at a no-till conference down in Natal. It was very interesting. They're very focused on what they're trying to do. They're trying to stop messing up the soil while they produce the crops. And they're trying to produce as much crop as previously, which they maybe won't be able to, but at least they'll be rebuilding the soil. But while we were talking about it, it became very clear that they are isolated in their field. But their field can't be isolated because it has to be part of the digital, and not just the digital, but the whole world structure where you have an issue of food supply, you have an issue of climate change, have an issue of degradation of everything. And the runoff here ends up in the sea over there. And when it ends up in the sea over there, it impacts on a lot of other issues all around the place, not least being the fish that you try to eat, because now they're poisoned because of something that happened 1,000 miles from the sea. So that data, which historically has been read in little lines, as it were, or in little pockets, now has to be more globally managed and understood. The biggest problem is how to understand it and who has got the ability, without it being hijacked, to actually present it and use it to best advantage, not just because someone wants to make money out of, let's say, glyphosate to kill weeds. Very good product in some contexts, very bad product perhaps in others. But it's not just them making money, but what do we all do in the end?
Yeah.
Does it improve the environment? Does it degrade the environment? So back to your big data. You need that. Data, you call it what you want, potato. But the point at the end of the day is somebody needs to be able to analyze it, and the question is who and how, and what standards are you applying, not just for the sake of standards. You made the point earlier about the German systematic way of managing is allowing them to set stuff out so they can manage it and organize more efficiently and thereby make advances in what they're processing.
Yeah, very impressive.
As you say, very impressive, and what they're going to benefit from it is it's not a matter of plundering other people's ideas. It's putting them out and seeing a better way to operate.
So, John, we will try to see if the issue of I wouldn't say new private sector, but there are businesses
Review private sector,
which are involved in digital landscape, and they probably are involved within traditional governance structures, but they themselves have got a different business model, the way they manage. So there is a mismatch.
In many cases, they probably are not aware that they're under governance. They're doing what they're doing.
Yes.
They comply with laws sometimes, most of the time. They don't necessarily comply with, if you like, the moral future. They quite often don't even think about it. And you draw their attention to it, and either they're completely anti and they don't care, or they're absolutely shocked and horrified to realize that they've been making a mistake. So you're right, governance.
Anyway, I mean,
it's a big subject,
international community, that be it ISO, be it IMF, in about 10 days' time in Washington, they are preoccupied about the fintech, financial technology, about the value of data, about statistics, how they come about,
and
about
artificial intelligence
standards and artificial intelligence. So I think the overall umbrella of the CPTM inclusion initiatives, which emerged from Dar es Salaam on leveraging technology in 2013, moving towards, in addition to value of technology, but value of data, it couldn't be more progressive. I'm saying it's just a question of kind of we ourselves in the group finding a new business model on how to more rapidly share and probably stimulate action. The dialogue, as you said, is still probably the smart partnership type of dialogue, including attached with open houses and the think tanking, are still
probably very
exceptionally relevant to this situation because of the.
But it's also the linkages. It's the linkages, I think, that are the most important.
That are made. Yeah.
And it was said to me the other day about a particular situation. Oh well, its time is gone, and it's not as good as it used to be. And I realized that there was a mistake in the concept there. The perception was that, oh well, the good times are finished. But when I remember the beginning of things, when they were really down there and they were quite small, and how it's grown to here, today, as a base, compared to that base, it's very much higher. And actually you can expand much further. It's just a question of trying to understand which is the way forward. And I think maybe the AGM this year is a very important one for a consideration of how to take it forward. Not just live in the past, but let's just see what is needed, what people are looking at. Because one thing is very clear, there's a huge amount of confusion out there. And perhaps we don't know the answers, but a lot of our members have got some good ideas.
Actually, one of the things that next week we are going to do is to respond to the request of the Governor of Central Bank of Tanzania, Professor Benon Dulo, to kind of interact with their senior management in the Bank of Tanzania in relation to putting some light on blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and de-risking, and all sorts of various things. And there is a problem always into trying to say, well, do I need technology people, or do I need people who are doing their own business using or being the beneficiaries of data? And that is where CPTM is extremely well equipped to deal with because it has both.
You got the mix.
You have the mix, including policy. So the context is very action-based framework. Anyway, just wanted to finish.
Thank you.
I don't know, as a private sector, if you are kind of usually following every year the fever of Nobel Prize, but yesterday there was a Nobel Prize for physiology, for medicine, for 2017, the circadian rhythm.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I'm sure it has fundamental understanding brings in, but also fundamental applications to genetics and so on.
Well,
and today was the physics.
Yeah,
the gravitational waves, and tomorrow will be chemistry.
And I don't know
so
what
it's a whole week.
I don't know where they are all going, but just talking about the circadian rhythms to a fisherman is important. Because we all follow that.
Because of the sun and the moon.
It's tidal,
Absolutely.
it's moon, it's sun,
Absolutely.
it's dawn, it's late.
No.
And when you talk about gravity, does this mean anti-gravity? Are they getting there? Are we going to be able to?
I was almost tempted to ask you, what do you think would be the economics prize, Nobel Prize, or the peace prize?
Well, I don't know about the
or
peace
what
prize.
would you like to be?
Well, the economics prize, I don't know, some sense in the systems. Whoever's produced something along those lines, and I don't know who has. And peace, would be nice if there was somebody who could promote a bit of peace.
I'll tell you what I would like to have happen, but it's unlikely to happen. That is probably a standard definition of an agreement of what is peace nowadays, because I mean the peace process is very much affected or stimulated by the data technologies.
Yeah, it is.
The definition of peace and the peace processes probably need to be kind of reviewed.
It would be nice if people were honourable. I think you could find a way to peace. I'm afraid people are not always honourable, and too many people are not.
Well,
And
blockchain technology can bring trust, people are saying, but...
yeah, well, let
yes.
us see.
Yes. Anyway, John, so
Yeah.
thank you very much for you coming
Okay.
always to, as a private sector, to
pop
keep,
in.
To keep things going in a right way. So hope
Thank
to
you.
see you again next week.
Thank you, Mikhail.
Okay.